thank you so much for joining us today for a conversation just around history in our community, around our, we're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, as you know. And I thought who better to kind of be a witness to the history within our community over the last several years than you. For those of us that don't know you, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born and raised here in Kansas City. Moved to Kansas City's west side about 1960 something, early 1960s, and fell in love with the community. As a youngster, I grew up working at a very young age, about the age of about maybe 13, 14. A lot of us did. You hear this story a lot from people my age, that we all ended up working. I worked at grocery stores and sorted bottles down at Gold Crown Liquors, and worked flipping hamburgers one time, and got my paycheck at the end of the week. I think it was like maybe a total of about $7 or $8 for the entire week. So I lasted a week there, moved on to my next job. But I love Kansas City's west side.
Awesome. So what do you do now, Joe?
Well, now I'm publisher of Kansas City Hispanic News. Prior to that, I spent a 26-year career in television at Fox 4 News. Before it became Fox 4 News, I was there when it was WDAF, NBC affiliate as well. And spent 26 years there. As I started out as a processing film back in the day, and then worked my way up to editing film, and then went to shooting video and became a camera person. And then from there went to reporting.
I'm Joe Arce, your video host. I'm standing outside the headquarters of Guadalupe Center at 1015 West 23rd Street on Kansas City's west side.
Just kind of started, like I said, start at the bottom and worked my way up. And when I left there, I was a photojournalist / reporter for Fox 4 News.
What motivated you to start your own newspaper?
I wanted to create a newspaper that was more in-depth than what we had at the current time. And nothing against what was out there, but there was no one that was actually producing in-depth reporting. And that was something that I learned in television. And so back in the day when I was in television, I used to just cringe when I would do a story that was maybe 2 minutes long, and then they wanted to cut it down to about maybe, a minute. And I was losing like 50% of the contents. And so it was frustrating for me, but at the same time, I understood because, news is really fast paced when you're on television. And so I wanted to dedicate more time, more energy into packaging stories for the community through newspaper. And so after a 26-year career, I decided that it was time for me to do that. And fortunately for me, when I informed the news director, my boss, my mentor, he said, "Joe, you're not going anywhere." I says, "What do you mean you're not going anywhere?" He says, "I need to leave. I'm wore out." And he said, "Well, we'd like for you to stay and stay a little longer, maybe." And I said, "Well, if you have no problems with me having a newspaper and also covering news for Fox 4, I don't have a problem with it either." So I did it for about a year, and to the point that I just couldn't do it any longer. And so finally I left after that. That was in 1996. So we're 24 years old today. Next year will be our 25th anniversary. And I'm not sure where the future lies after 25 years, to be honest with you.
Well, that's first and foremost, congratulations on 24 years. I think that is it's a huge accomplishment. We've obviously seen a lot in our community over the last 24 years. I'm excited to see what is after, the 25th year. We'll talk about your future plans here in a second. So take me back to 1996. What is Kansas City like during that time? You just wrapped up your 26-year career on TV on that end. You're transitioning into being your own editor and your own publisher of a newspaper. Take me back to 1996. What does life look like in Kansas City?
Well, in 1996, we launched our paper in September. My goal was to launch it on Cinco de Mayo in 1996. I was promoting it for Cinco de Mayo. But prior to that, I think it was maybe March or April, we had gone down to the city market and we had placed just a little stand. I was emceeing a fiesta, and I had my family man a stand for me that just says "Coming, Kansas City Hispanic News is coming." And so my sister came up to me and she says, "Joe, you have any money on you, any change?" I said, "What do you need change for?" because we were offering subscriptions for that day, but I had no clue that somebody was actually going to pay for a subscription that day. And so we gave them an application to fill out and, send in a check. And we walked away with about $300 or $400. I mean, I'm telling you, I didn't even have a prototype up there, but people knew me. They knew that I was at Fox 4 News, and I was a newsman. And so they trusted it. They trusted me. They trusted what we were putting out there. And it was just amazing that somebody would invest without even having a prototype. And they wanted the paper and sight unseen, so to speak. And then so to speak, the rest is history, because a lot of times it was confusing for folks, especially that year that when I was asked to stay at Fox 4 News and also do my newspaper, because people would ask me from time to time, Joe, is this for television or is this for your newspaper? So, it made it kind of difficult, but I enjoyed it, I think, and then people also enjoyed it as well. But, I thought I had a great idea. And sometimes when you start a business, most of the time you think you have a great idea. Sometimes you succeed and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
And in my case, I feel as though that I had a good product and people started to buy into it. I was very fortunate and very blessed to have people that that start the paper with me, that they heard about me starting the paper and they wanted to be a part of that. Jesus Ortiz was one of them. Kathleen Cruden was another one. Jose Faust was among those that also helped me at the very beginning as well. John Silva, and I know some of these names you may relate to, some of them you don't, but it's really important to me because some of these folks were willing to do it for free. They're willing to work for free for me for the first few months, just for us to get it started. And Gene Chavez was another one that also wrote for me at the time. So sent around there was some really great people. They saw the potential for our newspaper as well.
So you mentioned being an entrepreneur, starting your own business. Sometimes ideas don't work out. Sometimes ideas do. This one has worked out. What do you attribute the success to in terms of like what you've done as an entrepreneur yourself? I'm going to ask you a little bit about the barriers here in a second, but like, what do you attribute your success and your longevity to?
Well, I'm not sure about my success yet, believe it or not. I think I'm there. But the thing of it is that, let me tell you how important this is for if you are thinking about going into business. Do some soul searching, and it took me a couple of years when I was at Fox 4 News. I had thought about this for a couple of years, thinking, okay, do I really want to do this? Because I felt as though I was at the top of my career. There was nowhere else for me to go, but other than to start my own business. But at the same time, I kind of felt like as though I needed to really do some soul searching in terms of, well, do I really want to do this? I thought at one time, I said, well, since I'm at the top of my career, maybe I'll go sell houses. I knew nothing about real estate.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll sell cars. I like cars. Maybe I'll sell cars. Didn't have a clue about selling cars. Really, the only thing I really knew was news. I had a great background in news. I knew how to package stories. I knew how to develop stories, how to produce stories. So I thought I should go more that route because this is truly what I knew. Now, on the business side of things, I wasn't really familiar with the advertising side because when I was in television, people would come up to me from time to time and says, hey, listen, can I talk to you about an ad for us? And I says, listen, we have this department over there at Fox 4 News, and you can call that number, and they have a sales force there, and they'll take care of you. And so I'm just here to do a news story. But when you own your own company, it's completely different because people do want to talk to you about advertising, and sometimes they want to get their message out there. And so I have to separate them. If it's something like if it's a news story, I want to report on that side. Talk to me later about advertising, but I really felt as though that I want to talk to this potential person to talk to me about a news story first and foremost. And then, like I said, they can call me at a later date, and then we can talk about them advertising if they want to do that. Sometimes people think that as though that, well, if you do a story on us, do we have to advertise with you? Of course not. And sometimes people think, well, do you charge for the story? No. We do that. Now, we do depend on advertising to cover our cost, but that's a separate whole entity. And that was something that I had to get used to at first. It was very, very uncomfortable for me. First and foremost, I'm a journalist by trade. And so you shouldn't mix both. but when you're a small business like I am, you have to, and most of the Hispanic papers and other minority papers, you have to do both, to be honest with you. I mean, in order to survive.
Yeah. I'm curious, you launched Casey Hispanic News. How do you feel initially? What was the community's reception to that from a Latino perspective, from a Hispanic perspective?
Repeat that again. I'm sorry.
What was the community's reception of the newspaper back in the day?
Well, when I first started the paper, I'll give you an instance. That reporter was covering the opening of my paper, and they asked me, "Is there enough Latino news in Kansas City for the city to have 2 newspapers? We don't think that there's maybe enough Hispanic news here." I says, "No, there's a lot of Hispanic news in the Kansas City area, metropolitan area. You're not covering it. The mainstream media was not covering a lot of the stories in the metropolitan area, in the Latino communities. Now, in the era that I was in television, you would see maybe a Hispanic story on television, especially at the top of the newscast. And most of those times, it would be a person being arrested or they had been charged with something, at the top of the newscast. And then if it was a feature, a live feature, that would be buried in the bottom of the newscast. And some of my stories, I'll be honest with you, when I first started out, they were at the bottom of the newscast. But as I got better as a journalist, my story started to climb up. And then all of a sudden, I'm at the lead story. And so it took a while, because either my lack of experience at the time, but I had a great mentor, my news director. My news director encouraged me. He criticized me, he encouraged me, and he complimented me. And that's what it takes. You got to have a good mentor in order to be able to succeed, especially for me. It was just really, really important. And, to this day, it was I just felt very, very blessed to the fact that for them wanting me to stay after starting this newspaper, I felt as though that was a compliment of me, but I was also of them, because I was a product of Fox 4 News, to the point that when you see that paper, you can really credit Fox 4 News for the creation of it at the same time, because my education came from Fox 4 News in terms of the journalism side of it. Yeah. So.
Now, I appreciate you sharing. So now let's go into your 5-year celebration of Casey Hispanic News.
A 5-year?
Yeah. Do you remember the 5-year? Or no?
Vaguely. I think we did celebrate, but it wasn't a big celebration. Now, my 10th year, that was a big blowout. The 10th year anniversary was a big blowout. We held it down at the Town Pavilion, which is now the AT&T Tower downtown.
Yeah.
And it was just a great event, live music, food, dancing. It was a great celebration as well. And a lot of our readers attended that. It was open to the public. Everything that I do, I want to share with our readers, because I feel as though that they are a big contributor to the success of Kansas City Hispanic News.
Yeah. I love the relationship that you're building with the readers. I love how they're at the forefront of the conversation as well. I'm interested in those first 10 years of running your newspaper. I think there has to be, I could be wrong, but I feel like there has to be like a sigh of relief. Like, we've made it this long. We've survived as a small business for 10 years. That's kind of an exciting thing. It's a huge accomplishment. What are you thinking at that time? How did the newspaper shift at the 10-year mark, and how did it remain the same?
Well, I felt good about my 10-year anniversary, and that we were still moving forward and growing. At the same time, it's still a little scary. There's a lot of uncertainties, Part of that, when I was turning 10 years old, there were some major newspapers that were shutting down. And so that also concerned me. What if they're shutting down and they're large, multi-million-dollar operations? What does that say about small publications as well? And over the years, we have seen some small Latino and other minority papers fold over the years. And, that's a tough thing to go through. And unfortunately for me, I didn't have to go through that. But, it was tough times there for a while, especially even with all of this, the 911, back in the day when we had 911, that was really tough as well. The coronavirus was another one that's been tough for us, for all. And you know that I'm not telling you nothing new in
Yeah.
terms of whether it be any advertisers right now in the advertising business, they're struggling. But I felt as though, for instance, you know, nationally there were a lot of Latino newspapers that were going from weekly to biweekly, just to cut cost. I couldn't do that. You know, I said from day one that when we were going through the pandemic from the very beginning in March, you know, I'm not cutting back. I got to continue to get these stories out there because it was so important to get the COVID stories out into the community,
Yeah.
especially the Latinos, especially in Spanish, because we were a part of the target. We were in a hot spot area, both in Kansas and Missouri, and people needed to have this information in their language, whether it be both in either in English or Spanish.
Yeah.
So I felt as though that, you know, that we had to do this no matter what. So if I had to go into the red for a little while in order to get it out there, I was going to do that. And we did that. We did that.
I appreciate that commitment. And I think that, you know, it speaks to your character. It speaks to who you are as a leader in our community, making sure that our community has access to the information and seeing how much you value that as well. I think that that's pretty powerful. You've been covering our community since '96, right? How have you seen the Latino community change over the last 24 years?
You know, let's start out with Hispanic Heritage Month. You know, we created our paper, gave birth to it on September the 16th, 1996, and great years. I mean, we went through 9/11, and we're going through COVID right now. And I think this was probably the hardest of my 24 years has been this pandemic in terms of sadness, in terms of death, uh, in terms of people being affected by this COVID. I mean, it stops at no one. I mean, you know, you and I both, I think, know of people that have COVID right now. And, you know, for this Hispanic Heritage Month, it wasn't a big celebration. You know, most of the celebrations were all canceled. And, you know, we were supposed to be celebrating our 24th anniversary. That was canceled. But it's not about the celebration so much. But the reality is that for me as a journalist, you know, I take it to heart that we're seeing so much pain, so much health issues right now with COVID, to the point that personal friends of mine are in hospitals. Some of them have died. And that's, you know, I covered, for instance, one individual, Loreto Lopez, recently, and his passing, but it was a story about life and death. The story was based on a person that survived and a person that died. And the reason I did that story was because I wanted to share that story with our community so that they would take it seriously. And it was very painful for the families to talk to me about this, their situations and what have you. But they were willing to talk to us because they wanted to do some good for the community as well. And this is what the whole reason for the paper, the reason it exists is to get the knowledge, to get the resources that people need in our community, because we also offer, you know, tips, you know, how to stay safe, stay at home. We try to tell people when the next testing is at, where the free testing is at. You know, if people are needing food, we try to share that with them as well. We try to do that in advance at times too, because if I'm going to go cover a story, they're having it that weekend, it doesn't do me no good to report on it, because when people read it, well, they're going to say, well, it already happened. So I try to be on top of things where I can tell people maybe next week these things are happening, so that they'll know maybe if they are in need of food or need to be tested or something of that nature, they'll be able to know where to go and who to ask for.
You know, Joe, you mentioned talking about just a lot of the difficult natures of these conversations. I'm interested. You're a journalist, and so you have some training in this. But when you cover a story where you have deep personal beliefs, and you're also trying to get the other side of this story, how do you navigate that conversation where you feel one way and you feel strongly about it, but you also realize that, you know, it's important to tell essentially both sides of the story? How do you navigate that as a leader?
It can be tough. And politics is a perfect example of that. Sometimes I think you and I spoke about recently how I'm able to sometimes do a story on politics, and Democrats most of the time will talk to me. But finding Hispanic Republicans to talk to me publicly is very difficult at times, and I find that frustrating because I want to know what they're thinking as well. I want to know, why they believe in the Republican Party, and Democrats they'll always tell me why they believe in the Democratic Party and their candidates and what have you. But there's so many Hispanic Republicans that won't share that information. And to me, it's just like if you make a great, enchilada, don't you want to share that with others and say, hey, this is what I do, this is how I do it. And so, I just wish that more Republicans would come out and share why they're members, why they're a part of the Republican Party. What is it they like about the party? What do you feel as though they're doing for Latinos as well? Because maybe there's things in there that I don't know that I could share with my readers as well. So that's just one example.
So I'm gonna push you here. Why do you think that Latino Republicans don't actually share about the commitment to the party or what the Republican Party's doing?
Well, a lot of them are in business. And so I believe that sometimes it could affect their business if if the public knows that maybe that they are Republicans, so they don't want to do that. And the people used to always think that I was a Republican, to be honest with you. And I was always telling them, because maybe my writings, I don't know. But a lot of times people have a tendency to also thinking that the business community are Republicans. And so to be honest with you, I'll share this for the first time. I'm an independent, so to speak. I vote for individual. I don't vote for party. And so, for me, that's just who I am. But when people say, well, you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, I'm glad that they don't know what I am, to a certain degree. But that makes it easier for reporting. But I really don't like for my personal agenda in terms of politics to affect the story, because when it comes to me reporting the story, it shouldn't make a difference. I'm trying to get both sides of a story. I'm trying to get information about the Republican Party as well as the Democratic Party as well.
I appreciate you breaking that with us as an exclusive. We now know that Joe Arce is an independent, and so I feel like that's big news somehow. I'm kidding, Joe. I just appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that with us a little bit. We talk about the future. You've seen it all. I would assume you've seen a lot of things happen within the community. We talk a lot about hope during these days, right? And how do you maintain hope? What is your hope for the future? What is the hope for our community for years to come?
Well, I'm a positive person to begin with. And so therefore, I try to share that vibe with others, because I do think that there'll be better days ahead. They can't get any worse than what we're going through right now, to be honest with you. You start looking back at the things that we've been through, and we've pretty much have got through most of those issues, whether it be 9/11, whether it be COVID, and other things that personally or professionally that we've gone through. But I think that we do have better days ahead of us. I think for the most part, most people just want to get through this COVID and survive it to a certain degree. So I think that gives us hope. But at the same time, I think we lose a little bit of that hope from time to time when we lose somebody personally, or we see somebody that is suffering. Then we lose a little bit of hope. But I think that hopefully we'll have a better 2021, because I know for a fact that people my age will say, "Oh, the good old days back in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s." Well, you and I can say now the good old days were back in March of this year. St. Patty's Day. Those were the good old days.
I remember February of this year. What a long time ago that was.
Exactly.
When COVID wasn't really a thing yet. Oh, wow.
And people miss their friends. You miss sometimes. Your buddies. I know I told my wife one day. I just need to have some male bonding time. With my friends. And you can't go out because everybody's afraid to go out.
Yeah.
And I understand that. And so the only thing you're really doing is just getting together with your immediate family, and that's about all that you can do right now. That can even be dangerous at times.
Yeah, absolutely, because you never know what your immediate family's doing out there either, right? And so you have to have a lot of trust in these spaces.
Exactly.
No, I appreciate that. So I'm going to ask you this. So take off leader of KC Hispanic News. Let's talk about Joe Arce, the person. What do you like to do? How do you like to have fun?
Oh, wow. I want to have fun. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
I live and breathe news, to be honest with you. And so when I left Fox 4 News, it gave me a gift certificate to a golf course. And so running my business the first few years, I said, well, I'll go one of these days and get some golf lessons and what have you. And the first year went by, second year went by, maybe the fifth year went by. And one day I called up the golf club's store and I said, okay, I'm thinking about getting ready to take that gift certificate of $500 back in those days. And I gave him a call and no one answered. Had gone out of business. I had lost that $500 gift certificate. I didn't have time.
Right.
I didn't have time. So no, I work a lot. I guess you could say workaholic, because I will work on weekends. I will call somebody on Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon to do a quick interview with somebody. On Saturdays, I try to give myself my fun days Fridays. I try not to book anything. I try to just let that be my day. And sometimes somebody want to squeeze in a meeting in the morning. It's fine with me, but nothing, after like 11 or 12. That's my time, and I get to enjoy that, either with my wife or without my wife. But that's my time. But just only on Fridays, believe it or not. But I have fun. I mean, I do things. Go out and enjoy my friends, and we'll do things with my friends.
Yeah. So Friday afternoons are off limits. No. So I'm gonna push you even a little bit further on that. Like, what's your ideal Friday afternoon? You had your morning meeting at 9 o'clock. You had your coffee. You're done for the day. What is Joe doing at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday?
I'll call my wife and we'll do some lunch. We'll do some lunch.
Okay.
We'll sometimes sneak off to a casino, maybe just for a little while.
What's your favorite casino game?
Pardon me?
What's your favorite casino game?
Oh gosh, I don't play the blackjack or anything like that. Machines most of the time, just a little bit of that. But we're not big gamblers though. But that's kind of relaxing for me.
Yeah.
And I love music. I love Tejano music. I love conjunto music. I love Mexican music, like boleros, and I like Juan Gabriel, Vicente Fernandez. Play music all the time, whether it be here in my home or whether it be at the office. I always have Mexican music on.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. It kind of relaxes you. It makes you feel good about everything. You can lots in the pain.
Exactly.
No, that's great. Let me ask you about just journalism in general. Clearly, you hear a lot, not just from the administration, but there's a community conversation around the mainstream media, what that means, where we're finding our information. Obviously, social media has completely shifted. I think the business itself of what is fact versus what is not fact. How do you feel about the institution of journalism now?
I think it's solid. It has changed a lot though, because we used to use words like, okay, this is a pundit. A pundit is a person that's on the air or on radio, or we call them commentary in our newspaper, people giving their opinion. But it seems of late that the last few years, especially when Trump's had come into office, that some of these reporters have become pundits as well. And for me, that's a big no-no. I come from old school, and I don't like to interject my thoughts into a story. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it separately in a commentary versus trying to interject something within the body of the story. A true journalist is not going to go and cover a story and inject himself in it. Story shouldn't be about a journalist or the way he's thinking about that story. It should be more about people. Just cover the facts and let it and let the story tell itself with those interviews. But you shouldn't have to interject much information at all, at least not your opinion. And it's what we're seeing today. I think a little bit more of that. And when people turn on the tubes, they don't separate the pundit from a true journalist. When they look at the national news, for instance, CNN or MSNBC or Fox, they kind of put them all together, but they are completely different because Fox is more opinionated than the other two networks as well. The other two networks do have true journalists on the air.
Who are some of your favorite journalists currently working?
Chris Wallace is probably one of my favorites. Stephanopoulos is another one of my favorites. And another one that, believe it or not, is a real good friend of mine, and I've known her for about over 40 years, is Gail King.
Oh, really?
Yes, Gail and I worked together here in Kansas City. When she was here in Kansas City, we became the best of friends. And we were so close that when we had my daughter, she gave my wife a baby shower at her apartment in Midtown.
That is so awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you still connect with Gail? Are you?
Yeah, in fact, but not as often. She's a busy woman these days.
Of course she is. Of course she is.
Yes. But she came into town about, last time I saw Gail was about 5 years ago, and she came to Kansas City Hispanic News, and her favorite place to eat onion rings, the only onion rings, not the hamburger, was Paul's Drive-In over in Kansas City, Kansas. She loved the onion rings.
I love that. So I'm going to ask you the question that we all want to know. You know, Gail, I assume you know Oprah.
I know Oprah.
What was that like, meeting her?
Oh, Gail was just a great human being. She still is. When she first came to Kansas City, I remember we were out covering a story, and it was in the Midtown area, and this lady, I can't really remember the story itself, but we had done a story on this lady and the family, and Gail noticed that she had no food in the refrigerator. Mm. So Gail says to me, she says, "Joe, we need to go to the grocery store and buy this woman some food." And we did that, literally, and we took it back to her. I mean, this is the human side of Gail King. Yeah. She was just a great reporter. She really was. And I enjoyed working with her. We, like I said, we became the best of friends as well. Yeah. But I think Oprah had just a few more extra dollars than I have.
Just a little bit.
Billion now, or billion.
No, that's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned just stories that are memorable. What story in your career still sticks with you? Or what was I guess a monumental story in your life that you covered that you still clearly remember?
9/11. 9/11 was probably one of the bigger stories. That was probably the major story for us back in the day when we were starting on our paper. I believe that we were like maybe 5 or 6 years old at the time. Yeah. And the impact that it had, not just in New York, but here in Kansas City. And this is why it goes back to what I was telling you earlier about, making sure that we talk to the people and get the people side. And there were Latinos that had lost their life there, and their relatives lived right here in Kansas City. And I was able to get some of those interviews, and we were able to put those onto our newspaper as well. And so, and that's one of the things that still mainstream the media still has. I have an issue with them because they don't cover a lot of times our community as well as they should. Yeah. I feel as though that they can still do a better job in covering our communities. It's great that they did, like, for instance, Hispanic Heritage Month. Some of the television stations, they focused in on the Latino community. Bravo for them, bravo for them. But the thing of it is that we are around 24/7, 7 days a week. So you don't necessarily have to wait just for Hispanic Heritage Month to do stories in the Latino community. Don't wait until somebody dies. Don't wait until we have a tragedy in our community to come out here and cover the Latino community, because we have a business community. We have, success stories of students, going for higher education. We have the business community that are really, really keeping their doors open and growing. And we're not just about, restaurants and bars and things of that nature. We have people in all sorts of different businesses, a lot of success stories out there. And I just kind of wish that mainstream would do more stories on that. I can't do it all by myself. I know a lot of times I'm out covering a story and I look around the room and I'm the only person there. And it's really sad because I was hoping that maybe one of the television stations would pick up that particular story. I mean, I love exclusive, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I want for those stories to be shared on television as well,
Yeah.
So another memorable time I remember, it was about during the Kobach era, maybe about 5 years ago. I'd gone to a rally that Chris Kobach and a program person on KCMO radio had a show, and they teamed up together along with the senator from congressman from up north, and they had a rally down at the plaza, and that rally was for white supremacist folks. And I decided that I wanted to cover that story because I kind of felt as though that I'm always writing about the immigration issues and all the other issues that we face with that. And I felt as though that I need to go down there and find out what these folks are thinking and what they're saying, so I could share that also with our readers and to keep them informed. So as I'm doing my interviews, and I interviewed Chris Kobach and I interviewed some other folks that were there, but I had this one guy that was walking around me. I'm doing my interview, and then finally he says to me as he's walking around for like maybe the third time, "Go home, wetback." And I didn't, at the time, I kind of ignored it. But then when he said those words, I went back to my car, sat in my seat for just a minute and thought about what he said. And it brought a tear to my eye. It really, really did. And I've been called names before. As a journalist, you're going to get called names from time to time. That doesn't bother me. But for him to say that, because home really, for me, was just like 5 or 6 miles down the north, Kansas City's west side. That's home for me. That was where I grew up at. And for him to say that to me, and the folks that organized that event, they apologized. And I have to give it to them. They did apologize to me. I said, "Joe, just never know what type of people are going to come in. And we apologize to you." And I says, but the damage was done. It was painful to hear that because, like I said, I just didn't really think that we were beyond that, but obviously we weren't. And this is what other people face every day. And, when they're being discriminated against. It was the first time this happened to me, but I've never felt discriminated against to that point. It was just like, but it did hurt. That was probably the most hurtful thing that I've experienced as a journalist for 50 years.
No, I think, it's interesting because you have conversations with people, you understand, I think at some point or another, you try to do something and somebody has an opinion about it, right? Somebody's going to say something about it. And then you have those moments that stick with you when somebody calls you a name like that, right? When somebody tries to other you, when somebody tries to say you don't belong in this country or whatever that narrative is. I think that I appreciate you sharing that because I don't think that's modeled. I could be wrong, but from what I see from folks, I know that those stories exist and they're typically told, amongst friends and amongst maybe colleagues, right? Close colleagues, but never out publicly in the open, and never, and to bring light to some of these issues, right? And so I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, I'll go further.
Yeah.
When I first went into television, I was probably 6 months into my job, and I did have one person come up to me, and he was very upset with me because I had gotten the job that he had planned for his nephew, and his nephew had applied for the job, and he didn't get it, and I did, and he was upset because he was upset because I was Hispanic. And the only reason he told me the only reason I got the job was because I was of Hispanic descent. But to be honest with you, I guess I was too naive because I didn't know that was the reason that they were hiring me as well. And when I learned of that, it was true. And I didn't know that. But let me tell you that from that, and that was 6 months into my new job. 26 years later, they're asking me to stay another year after I had already mentioned I was going to resign and leave. So I must have done something right, and
well, yeah, you've done more than right. I think, it's this fine line from my perspective anyways. It's this fine line of one, I think from a young age, we're taught about meritocracy, right? Like you work hard, you get opportunities, you continue to work hard, you grow in your career, you do the best you can. And then sometimes, when we're told that you only got the job because you're Latino, it completely dismisses all the hard work and the effort and everything that you've put into being in that position, right? And into that role.
But I got even with them because I did work hard, and I kept on working hard, and I kept on getting promoted. And that's what, and I had one time I had a chief photographer that was my boss, and he mentioned to me, you're not going to make it, Joe. And I was already there like maybe 8 or 9 years. You're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. And I swear this happened when I retired, and we had a going away party for me. He apologized. Because he saw where I was going to.
Yeah.
I made it.
How did that apology make you feel? Was it like, oh, thank you so much and thanks for the recognition, or was it like?
It was bittersweet. It was bittersweet. Yeah. But it's kind of like, I told you so, and stuff. But like I said, the only thing that I'm really proud of, and I when I mentor reporters, and I do that even today, I share with them, when you go into these jobs in journalism, do the best that you can, and go beyond the call of duty, because they could line up a series of reporters, producers, and there's all sorts of jobs in the media field. But if they lined up everybody, I as a manager now would say, okay, what do you bring to the table? What do you bring to the table? If we're going to have a cutback on jobs, I got to look at all these folks, and what separates each one of them. What do they bring to the table? And I'm going to pick those that do more for us. So therefore, this is why when I mentor reporters, I tell them, go beyond the call of duty. I know I did that. And this is why they asked me to stay another year when I did, because of the things that I did. And again, if there's going to be a cutback or whatever, and in today's times, you just never know. Look what's happening with the Star as well. So what is it that will keep you there? And what kept me there is that I had a niche. My niche was the Latino community. I was the go-to person at Fox 4 News when if anybody wanted to know what was going on in the Latino community, I was the go-to person. I had the other stations call me, and I was their competitor at one time, but Channel 5, Channel 4, Channel 9, Channel 41, they were all calling me if something was happening in our community, because they knew that I would probably know. And if I didn't know what was going on, I would find out, and I could give them some information, or they would call me and give me some information. And so it was a win-win for everybody. But it's really, really important that I think that journalists really go beyond the call of duty, because I think it will pay off for them at the end.
You're about to hit 25 years, as you mentioned, with KC Hispanic News. You mentioned that you don't know what's next, but what are you thinking currently about what the future looks like for you and for the newspaper?
Well, everything looks good for me right now. We just moved over to we're going to be moving to our new location at 1722 Holly in Kansas City's West Side.
And I'm familiar with that space.
I'm really excited about moving there. We downsized because I had a huge building, and all of our folks work from home now. When I bought the building 14 years ago, we had everyone working there at the newsroom, and the building became too big. And I thought, no, this was the time to sell it. So we decided to go in and sell that. So I'm excited for the next couple of years. I'm not sure what's going to happen after 2 years. And some people have already asked me, well, will you sell the newspaper? Will it go away? And I'm not too sure yet, to be honest with you, if I'm going to sell the paper, sell the name Kansas City Hispanic News. Maybe when I go, that Kansas City Hispanic News will go with me. The reason I say that is because I'm really concerned about the quality of the in-depth reporting, and I would like to see that continued. And if somebody, a true journalist, would come in, maybe we could talk, maybe we could work out something. But if it has to have the quality that it has now, and if it doesn't have that quality, I'd rather it come with me versus it being out there, because I don't want for that name to be out there and then not have the same impact that we gave it, because we gave it todo ganas, we gave it everything that we have. But, to a certain degree, I'm getting up in age, and, it's time for me to start thinking about this, but I start thinking about it for the next couple of years. So right now, it's a bright future for the next 24, 36 months.
I love it. Well stated. Well, and I believe it 110%. And I don't know. I don't feel like you're the type of person that can ever truly retire. I don't think that that's from what I know about you and from what I'm hearing. I don't think that that's in your cards, so to speak.
I'll find something to do. I'll volunteer somewhere because I've finally just in the last several years I've stepped off boards, and I really feel as though we need to get younger folks on boards. And I've done my time, and I don't want to take up anyone's seat. I'd rather have a younger person take up that seat than me. Like I said, I've already done my time, and I think it's really, really important that younger people like yourselves get involved in the community and be a part of our community to make it grow. And nothing against people my age, but sometimes, we have to make room for others so that they can grow and grow our city at the same time, because it's really, really important that we do that. Because just because I step off, that doesn't necessarily mean, or others that step off because of our age, that doesn't mean that our work is done.
Yeah.
It means that we need to continue to build and to grow our community so that we can improve the quality of life for Latinos in our community.
I agree, and I will stand on my end. I think it's a two-way street, right? It's not just about creating space for others and younger folks to come in, but it's also what younger folks need to do to understand the history and understand the contributions and not be, I think I'm guilty of this, and I've been guilty of this, like, we're starting something new and this is completely new. And, like, this is a whole new effort and a whole new movement. And the reality is, there've been people working on issues for the longest in our community. And so I think sometimes, the youth, and I'll call myself out in that space, like, we forget, or we don't know, or we want to be blinded to the fact that people actually exist and do work and have been doing this work for, decades. And so I think it's definitely a two-way street. It's an exchange of information because it's just incredibly important. I think this year and the last year for me has been really, I've been thinking a lot about the importance of understanding the history of our community and the importance of understanding, and being really thoughtful around that. Because I think without historical context, a lot of things get lost. And I don't know, it makes for, I think, a more rich conversation when you understand previous efforts and historical context to what we're trying to accomplish versus just like jumping in and pretending like nothing's ever been done before.
Right. Well, I'll give you an example. I served in the city of Gladstone Planning Commission for about 10 years. And I was in television back in those days. And of course, I was walking a fine line because people will say, well, that's a little bit of politics when you're serving on the planning commission, because the likelihood of people moving from that to serving as a city councilman or going into mayor. And people had approached me about that as well here in Gladstone. And but one day I realized as I was serving, they didn't need me there. Where I needed to be was in my own Latino community. And I stepped off. I said, after 10 years, I said, somebody else can take my seat here in Gladstone, Missouri. I feel as though the need is for me to get back involved in my community, in the Latino community, because I felt as though I had something to offer. And this is so important for us to have people, mentors, to have people that can serve on boards. So I shifted, and a lot of times people say, well, where do you live at? Well, I just tell them, I sleep in Gladstone, but I actually live in the Latino community, because majority of the time I'm there in the Latino community, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, most of the time, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
I sleep over here.
Well, Joe, as we wrap up our conversation, first and foremost, thank you so much for taking the time to just share a little bit about you and your work. One of my final questions to you will be this. What's one thing that you would like our community to know, either about you or about a topic of your choice? But what's one thing that you want, I guess, last words for you, for our community, or any final thoughts?
Well, a lot of people know me and wearing a lot of different caps over the years. And whether it be me serving as a volunteer at Guadalupe Center, or a board member at Guadalupe Center, or working over with El Centro, or working with Manny Rhodes, or working with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, or working with the University of Central Missouri, where we offer scholarship for Latinos, and a couple other entities that I'm involved. But but what I'm really hoping that people remember me more than anything else, I want to be known and remembered as being a journalist that was fair and that would always tell the story with facts and not with any fake news, because never have done that. And, I've always been true to our reporting and continue to do that, So I just want to, when I'm gone, I just want people to remember me as the newsman that I am and what I was.
Yeah. Well, Joe, thank you so much for your contributions. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. I think you are fair and balanced. I appreciate your commitment to not promoting fake news. And I can't wait to celebrate with you in a year for.
We'll be celebrating, yes.
Hopefully we'll be celebrating in person. If not, I'll commit to throwing you a virtual party.
Thank you, appreciate it.